a scenario, if a parent like wants to start their fostering license, like what's the first step they have to go through?
You want to know? Give me nine. You want to talk about that?
Well, they have to complete a 21-hour class where they learn about fostering and children that the different types of abuse and what is allowed in foster care system and what is not allowed, because they're not allowed to hit the children at all. So they learn that. They learn all of the court process of where like reunification, why they were removed. So it's just 21 hours that they do. Once they complete those 21 hours, we then run background checks on them. Call out to their house, meaning like if police officers have ever been out to their house, it'll show up on their call out log, and then we can request a report. And that report will say like why they went out. So we also do like sexual abuse search, statewide search. We do DMV and make sure FAHIS, which is pretty much if they have any abuse report, like child abuse reports, that will come up as well. So we pretty much do a thorough background check of them. Then on top of that, we go out to their homes. We do an inspection of the home to make sure like the water temperature is good, make sure there's not like any bugs or things in the house. It just makes sure that it's a safe environment. We make sure they have appropriate sleeping arrangements, because no child can share a bed with anyone. Then we write up a home study, which consists of 14 questions, but very lengthy questions about what their motivation to foster.
Like, I mean, I feel like I hear a lot of things that people, they think that, you know, people become foster parents because they, like, might want to take advantage of money given by the government.
We hear that all the time. Okay. Fostering, yes. Foster parents don't get paid to become foster parents. It's not a payment they don't receive. They do receive what it is, a stipend. It's called a stipend legally, but when we place, for example, when I place in a home, you first have to be financially able to be able to take 2-3 children, meaning that your income has to be up to par, because you are truly providing entirely for that child, meaning food, clothing, including them in your home, you know, families, vacation, trips, because they're your child. Just like if you had your son and daughter, they're just an additional person. The same way you would treat your daughter, your son is the same way we want you to treat our foster child. So that is what we're asking: food, dinner, all of that. The state provides a stipend based on an age, of course. There is a stipend. We have one here on the board that depends on the age of the child. The state provides a stipend per day.
On average, how long does it take for a kid to go from the system to like fully into a family? Like obviously it's different for everybody else.
Like when you mean like, for example,
like a few months or like a year?
Well, it all depends. Wendy's gonna tell you because she does case management before she had great experience. I know from a protective as an investigator, when you mean like when we remove a child, for example, would that be, let's say when we first get to the home, we remove the child and place them into a home of a foster parent? Would that be that type of a question?
Yeah, just about how long?
It changes. And the reason why is there's no true answer that we can give you.
Yeah, it's different for everybody.
It's different for everybody because Florida has, the entirety system itself has a short time, has too many kids. We have a lot more children than we can actually place in homes. That's the main aspect that right, meaning that if we remove a child, depends on the background, the reason we're removing, there might be a home readily available, but may not be because maybe the state or Broward County, where we're at right now, might be full, and we're not able to find a home. So then that child, unfortunately, goes to a shelter, like you were suggesting. And usually, if they're in a shelter, they can be there, depends on their age. Unfortunately, the preference of the selection of that foster parent wanting to take that child, that goes into play also, and the availability of that to be available. Then they can be there maybe 6 days, a day, 2 days, a month, it could be months, it could be
the full year.
for years, or it could be forever, for a long time.
Do you think race and ethnicity has like a factor to a parent's decision?
I can't speak what each person true heart and intentions are, but we do live in a society, of course, race is always a factor, and it's always going to be. In my line of work, in the years of experience, I can only speak for myself and not for Dwayna, but yes, I do realize, and race is definitely a factor. It does come into play a lot, where we would have a lot more of African American children who are left more behind, are not going to be readily available to be adopted because of race and the selection of those manners, versus a Caucasian or another child of that race was going to be easier to be placed and be taken into a home. So for me, definitely, in my experience and what I've seen, definitely has. But Dwayna can tell you herself from her perspective.
I don't even know if I would answer that one. But I mean, I've never, since working here, I've only been in licensing, 9 months? Because before I was a case manager. So, and I've never experienced in licensing where I call a foster parent and I say the race and they're denying because of the race.
Right.
You know, I have not experienced that. So I don't know if I can necessarily speak on it. But you know, when I do call, sometimes I just, you know, I'm rambling about the child. You know, I'm saying like the child's name is, you know, Jane Doe, and she is a white female, and this is why she came in. Now, I don't know if in the process of me saying everything about the child, maybe they've taken that race and then was just like denied it. I don't know.
Foster care is temporary. Temporary can mean a number of things, like a day, a week, a month, 2 months, a year, 2 years. It all depends on the seriousness of the situation a child is exposed to. I realize that social workers are on alert 24/7 to deal with kids that are in dangerous situations like parent neglect or abuse. It just takes one mistake to get a child taken away from their home. In Broward County, there are approximately 400,000 children in foster care, and out of that 400,000, 20,000 there are 20,000 reports of child abuse. To be a foster parent, it takes courage, because not everyone has that courage and love in their heart to open up their home to another child that's not their own, and to be loving and caring and sweet and be someone there for that child. It takes a lot. And a common misconception about foster parents are they're doing it for money. I get that. I kind of hear that a lot when people say, oh, if a foster parent is being abusive, it's because they don't even want to be a foster parent, they're just doing it for money. But it takes a lot of work to become a foster parent, and it can be frustrating, which is not an excuse if they are truly abusing someone, but it does take a lot of heart and courage and just compassion in general.
The majority of children in America are fortunate enough to have a home and loving family to come back to every single day. However, we tend to forget about the few people who are unfortunate enough to have these things in life. Many of these kids are currently in the foster care system of the United States, which helps gives these kids a temporary home and guardians. These homes and places the children are put into don't often give them the love and support they deserve. A lot of times we see that the children who come out of the system are neglected or not given enough love and support. Sometimes they don't even have anyone to count on or turn to in desperate times or in times of help. I believe that children that are in the foster care system have complex needs that need a lot of undivided attention from everyone around them. According to the American Society for the Positive Care of Children, children and adolescents with foster care experience are diagnosed with PTSD at twice the rate of U.S. war veterans. This is an incredibly alarming statistic, in my opinion. Although I am aware that the living conditions of their previous homes were probably worse, neglect, drug abuse, or drunk parents. There is still a lot more room for improvement in our current foster care system.
So we decided to do our social justice project on the foster care system, specifically in South Florida, Broward County. So what we learned was that it is incredibly broken. I feel that the foster care system is something that we don't really hear about a lot. We don't hear about adoptions, we don't hear about shelters. I feel that as if, let's say, homelessness is a lot more prevalent, especially in Broward County, than the foster care system. So one takeaway that I got from attending the interview with one of the caseworkers was that I didn't know this either, but in the state of Florida recently, about June of 2018, they took away shelters. So basically what shelters are like the middleman for the whole adoption process. So, you have a child in a corrupted home, where they would go there is to the shelter, which is pretty much like a holding space, and they can live there, from like a week to possibly years, God forbid. And so the shelter, they try to make a safe and fun environment, but a lot of times it's not. So we were actually pretty lucky enough to go visit a shelter that had better conditions than a usual shelter. When we talked to these caseworkers, they were not really for the removal of the shelters, because the shelter is pretty much, like I said, like the middleman. It's the holding space. It's where they go, to get out of these corrupted homes. So that's the thing. We learned that there's obviously not enough homes for these children to go to, and especially now without the use of a shelter, they don't know what they're going to do. It's just breaking the system even more. What I propose for these lawmakers who are in charge of making these laws is to actually be able to understand the foster system and, go visit these shelters and understand what they're really about, and, prioritize the budgeting, because, like I said, I feel like a lot of the budgeting is not really put forth towards the foster care system, and this is why it's continuing, to be more corrupted. So even though the shelter was closed, going to it made me realize how grateful I am for, the nice and safe family that I live with, and all that I have, and the school that I attend. So I really hope that other people in the future pay more attention to the foster care system, because it's just something that's not really prevalent, especially in Broward County, and truly feel blessed for what they have.
I think my experience at the foster care system was really good, because it gave me a better picture of the whole system and how it works and all the workers there. It's crazy how you could see a bunch of rich buildings everywhere surrounded by such a poor area, and like the conditions that the kids have to go through. And I definitely think that there should be more awareness of it in Broward County. I just never really hear about it very often, and overall it was a good experience.
The foster care system is something that a lot of people don't usually talk about. The children in this system usually don't have a loving family to go to, or they've been neglected, and the system now has been corrupted in so many different ways, whether it's the cutting on the federal budget, the abuse that they go through both mentally and physically, how the poor conditions of the homes, and many people don't realize that these children have feelings. They're human beings. They're not just some asset or something that's just been neglected and left on the side of the road. And doing this project really opened my eyes on their situation and what they have to go through, and how many people just don't see how much their lives can be affected based on the conditions of homes and the foster care system. So I'm just trying to raise awareness for everyone, so that in the future we can make the foster care a better system and have a positive impact in these children's lives.